Welcome, everyone, to today's podcast of Personal Growth Recipes with your host, Ron Dener. Now, today's podcast will cover the subject of learning, more specifically, why and how we can improve our learning skills. You know, much of the information is from a great teacher and a fellow podcaster by the name of Jim Quick. We're going to talk about acquiring information specifically through reading and other related topics. We have been conditioned to believe our knowledge and creativity is somewhat fixed, and nothing could be further from the truth. It is truly unlimited, and we use only a small percentage of it. Most of us grew up with a 20th century educational system that was pretty much geared for 20th century economics. You know, most of the 1900s were about preparing people to work on farms or on assembly lines of factories and other types of repetitive labor type jobs. And our educational system was a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach that was about what to learn. You know, English, history, science, math, but not about how to learn, how to think for yourself, how to solve problems, and how to be creative. Some other skills that we need to develop are interpersonal people skills, public speaking, and memorization. You know, most of us have smartphones nowadays, and we can Google any subject that we need information on. You know, we've literally outsourced our memory skills to our smartphones. The brain is a muscle, and a muscle only gets stronger if we use it more often. So we're hurting our memorization skills just because of the improved technological world that we now live in and enjoy. So let me give you an example that many of us can relate to, okay? I'm going to take you back. Let's go back to the 3rd or 4th grade. Now, I remember when the teacher would call on one student after another to read a paragraph or two from a book. Now, who remembers the feeling of panic when it was about to be your turn to read next? You know, this method helps to explain why many people nowadays grew up to have a fear of public speaking. And I don't know about you, but I rarely retained any information from this method of reading out loud by taking turns, and unfortunately, I probably still do it today. Now, one of the problems is that we think at a much faster rate than we read. So we're thinking about other things while another person is reading, or we're thinking about our turn to read that's coming up. Now, let's talk about reading books to improve your life. You know, think about this. Someone has put decades of experience into a book. And if we can learn to read a book in a few days versus several weeks, it's going to be the ultimate advantage that there is. In the Game of Thrones, there's a line that says, "A reader lives 1,000 lives, and a non-reader lives only one." So we're not talking about just nonfiction books, but also fiction books. You see, fiction books have been shown to help with your creativity and imagination. And after we get out of school, reading tends to go to a very low priority place in our lives. And if you can put reading books as a priority in your life is going to open up to gain so many more experiences that you would otherwise miss out on. Many of us have used reading as a sedative. For instance, we read, and I do this, we read right before we go to bed to help us sleep better. You know, now reading can have a very profound change on your life if we approach it with a different strategy. So I want to share a technique that I learned from Jim Quick that helps me whenever I'm taking notes while listening to another podcast or just reading out of a book. About 80% of the information that we absorb is forgotten within 48 hours of hearing it or reading it. That's crazy. The traditional method of taking notes is to write down the main points that stick out. Instead, what you want to do, draw a line down the middle of the sheet of paper. On the left-hand side, I take down the traditional notes of the main points. On the right-hand side, I make notes. I don't take notes. No, it's a subtle difference. But on the left side, I'm capturing, and on the right side, I'm creating. So on the right side, I'm writing down my impressions of what I'm capturing. And there are 3 magical questions you want to ask yourself to capture items on the right-hand side of the page. How many times have you read a page out of a book, you got to the end, and you forgot what you just read? It happens a lot, if we're honest. Now, that's a real problem because you are wasting your most valuable asset, your time. You see, the key to reading comprehension is asking more questions. So if you get to the end of a page in a book and you don't get anything out of it, it's because you are not asking questions, because questions are the answer. Now, functionally, that's what thinking is. You are asking questions and answering them. So let's go back to those 3 questions to capture items on the right-hand side of the paper. The first question is, how can I use this? You see, this is the creative part. The second question is, why must I use this? You see, the truth is, knowledge is not power. Using knowledge is power. You can't read a book on doing push-ups and get a benefit from it. You must do the actual push-ups, okay? Asking why must I do this moves it from our head to our heart to our hand. You see, when it's in our head, that's information. When it goes to our heart, that's inspiration. And when it goes to our hands, that's implementation. You see, the inspiration is asking, why must I use this or do this? So remember this, reasons reap results. Reasons reap results. The third question is, when will I use this? And this leads us to your calendar. So how does your daily calendar reflect that? The number one regret most people have is that they have lived their life for someone else in one or more areas of their life. And if you and I buy into other people's opinions of ourselves, we're going to run out of gas and go broke. Bottom line, one of the best decisions that you can ever make is to just be yourself. Doing things that are important in your life because they're a priority for you. They will minimize living a life of regrets at the end. So what does this all have to do with reading? Reading is one of the most effective and efficient ways to improve your life by becoming a better person. How many of you realize that it's impossible to change another human being? The best thing that we can do is to become a better person ourselves in order to set an example for them to hopefully follow. When we go through difficult times, they can define you, they can diminish you, or they can develop you. Prompting you to ask yourself those 3 questions and putting it into your calendar will put you on the track to making real changes in your life. In this day and age, we are drowning in information and what I call starving for practical information. That's why you must be selective on what you read and allow into your mind. There's one very important skill that you can develop, and that is to become a faster reader. If you can develop this skill and learn to read 1 or 2 books a week versus 1 or 2 books a year, the conventional way, you're literally going to be getting 50 to 100 times the knowledge that you would get otherwise. The last time you or I took a reading class was probably in grade school. It's just not a skill that's taught as we get older. The second obstacle to effective reading is a lack of focus. Okay? Lack of focus. How many of you, when you read, your mind wanders? You just can't concentrate. The big reason for this is that you are reading too slow. Now, if you read faster, you you would think that your comprehension would go down, but it actually goes up. And the reason is that our focus actually increases when we read faster. So if we read one word slowly at a time, our mind starts to wander. And the last thing is that inner voice right inside your head that talks with you while you're reading. Now, the reason that's a challenge is that you have to say all the words to understand them. And you can only read as fast as you can speak. Now, you don't have to say most of the words you read. Think about this. Over 90% of the words that you have already seen before and you can understand. So you're going to be fine. You can read a lot faster through these words, 90% of them. That's why it's a limitation when we read if we are not aware that we don't have to read this way any longer. And one simple technique to help you to do this, just use your finger or a pen as a visual pacer. Your eyes are attracted to motion, and it'll help speed up your reading. So I would also keep a to-do reading list, a list of books that you intend on reading. I've said this before, one book can change your life forever. And, learning to read faster can improve your productivity at work also. I'm going to give you an interesting way of thinking about this. It's been estimated that the average office worker spends between 2 to 4 hours per day reading, whether it be emails, memos, or articles. And, if we could just double our reading speed, most people, if you're working in an office, can save about 1 to 2 hours per day and be that much more productive in our work life. So think about this. If we could save 1 hour a day by learning to read faster, that's 365 hours a year, or about 9 extra weeks, about 2 months of increased productivity just by learning to read faster. And I would also recommend testing your reading speed. Do this. Set a clock for 60 seconds, 1 minute. Read for 60 seconds out of a book. Go back and count how many words you were able to read in those 60 seconds. Now, a good goal to start out with is to average about 200 words per minute. I'm going to give you some math here, okay? The average book contains about 64,000 words. If you're reading 200 words per minute, that takes about 320 minutes to read a book. If you divide that by 7, that's about 45 minutes per day. Now, if you could average one book a week based on 45 minutes per day of reading, that's good. If you can accelerate that, you can read 2 or more books per week eventually. The ability to learn faster is one of the most important skills that we can develop in the 21st century. The amount of information from the beginning of humanity up until about 2003, that amount of information is now created about every 2 days because of the internet and social media. So we need to learn more efficiently because of this. And one of the most challenging skills that we have is also in remembering names. Now, the most important sound to another person is hearing their name. It's one of the most important business etiquette and networking skills that we can develop. So a simple technique is do what we used to do when we were children. Attach a symbol to their name. For instance, if you meet someone named Mark, picture a check mark on his forehead. If we meet Carol, imagine a Christmas carol. If we meet Mike, picture a microphone in his hand. You see, we think in word pictures, and it's a very effective method to help us remember someone's name. If you're not clear on the pronunciation of their name, just ask them to spell it. And it's also a good idea to use their name during an initial conversation a couple of times. to use the power of what I call repetition to help remember their name. A famous quote, people won't remember what you said to them, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that goes back to remembering their name and using it when you meet them again. What it does is it shows them that they're important to you. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So, information combined with emotion becomes long-term memory. Now, I'm going to take you back. Go back when you were in school. What was the primary emotion that we felt? Well, unfortunately, for most of us, it was probably boredom. This explains why we can't remember the capital of Vermont or the 14th president of the United States. That's why entertainment is so powerful. You see, entertainment usually includes emotion. And we always seem to remember the entertaining or the fun moments in our lives much more. So to improve our long-term memory, we really need to add emotion, and it takes motivation on our part to do that. It just doesn't come naturally. We need to put some effort into it. There's a new term called digital dementia. Digital dementia. We are so used to using our smartphones to do our thinking. I've talked about that before. That we're not using our brain nearly as much as we should. I'll give you an example. Have you ever been to a restaurant? Okay. And instead of calculating the tip in our head, what do? We grab our phone and we do the calculation on the phone. And another example, we now have Google available to look up anything at our fingertips, instead of really thinking it through in our mind. Like I said before, the brain is a muscle, and the less we use it, the weaker it gets. We all have a to-do list, right? There's also a not to-do list. And one thing not to do, this is a big one, folks. One thing not to do is to check your phone the first 30 to 60 minutes when you first get up, and the last 30 to 60 minutes before you go to bed at night. We are the most creative and open to suggestion when we first wake up in the morning. So if you start checking your phone for emails or for Facebook, you're training your brain for distractions. So you have to say no to good in order to say yes to great. Your focus level is going to suffer the rest of the day. The average person, this is interesting. The average person looks at Facebook over 50 times per day. It's addictive. I'll admit that. So if you start doing it out of habit, and it also trains you to be reactive when you start the day with emails. It puts you on the defensive. How do you build a great day if you start out reacting to other people instead of taking control yourself? This habit is absolutely huge if you're looking to go through the day in a more relaxed state and with less worry. So once again, I know it's a habit, but unplug your phone 30 to 60 minutes before you go to bed at night. Also, that the light that is emitted from the phone or your laptop makes it more difficult to fall asleep, and it also fills your mind with distractions and worries to disrupt your sleep. So if you want to win the day, you must win the first and last half hour. Remember that. Technology is a tool that we are supposed to use. When we use technology out of habit, who becomes a tool? You see, technology ends up using us. We become the tool. Now I'm going to shift over. Let's talk about the skill of listening to another person while having a conversation. Retention is not the most important skill here. Attention is the most important skill. We tend to try and think of what we're going to say next while the other person's talking. I know that's one of my bad habits I'm trying to get around, okay? Many people try to be interesting instead of trying to be interested. You want to be present with the other person talking and concentrate on being interested in them. Try this little thing here. If you write the word listen and scramble the words, you get the word silence. Many people are talking to themselves while the other person is talking. This just doesn't work. We cannot multitask, and it shows through. Speaking of self-talk, your self-talk has a profound effect on the results in your life. Remember, if you fight for your limitations, you will end up keeping them. If you argue for your limits, they are yours. Your program is a supercomputer, and if you tell yourself that you're bad at remembering names, you're going to be bad at remembering names because you programmed your supercomputer not to remember names. They say that the two most powerful words in the English language are also the smallest. I am. Whatever you put after that is going to determine your destination in life. If you want to change what you put after those two words, I am, one of the most important areas to look at is your environment. I don't mean to step on toes here, but look at who you're hanging out with. It may be one of the main things that prevents you from changing. Now, this is a tough one to realize, but you may need to consider it if you feel it is holding you back. Your external dialogue can become your internal dialogue. Self-awareness is so important. Be aware of not labeling yourself with these two words, I am. Just kind of be conscious of that. So in finishing, remember that self-love is not selfish. One of the biggest challenges people have in life is the fear that they're not enough. I believe that's what holds us back. You have to fall in love again with a person in the mirror who has been through so much. We are happy when two things happen. Number one, you need the curiosity to know yourself because that's self-awareness. Number two, once you know yourself, you need to have the courage to be yourself. And that's a different game. So looking back, we don't want to have those regrets of basing our happiness on other people. That's where we limit ourselves. And that's why we need to spend part of each day on self-care and allow yourself to just be yourself. So, this concludes today's podcast of Personal Growth Recipes. And, if you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and leave a comment down below. And please follow me on Twitter at Ron Dener. Follow me on Instagram at DenerRon. I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ron Dener. And as always, subscribe to Personal Growth Recipes on Apple Podcasts. And please give us a 5-star rating if you've been enjoying it. And like and share our Facebook page, Personal Growth Recipes. So be sure to tune in next Wednesday for my upcoming podcast. This is Ron Dener, your host for Personal Growth Recipes, serving up and signing off.